Well, hello there. Hello. Welcome back to the JJ Michaels Show, also known as the Political Spectrum. We're going to consume news. We're not going to be consumed by the news. That's what we're doing. Got a lot to talk about today. And doing some things a little bit differently today in terms of how we're setting up the podcast, and I think it's gonna result in some improvements in my ability to deliver this thing on a regular basis. So the last show, it was a week between shows. The show before that, it was a week between shows. And I'm just going to be honest with you. What happened was that I started doing video of these shows so that I could post them on YouTube and so that I could post them on the Spotify video podcast thing. Spotify is who we used to host the podcast here at the Political Spectrum. And I think that eventually the Spotify podcast video thing is going to get like favored by the Spotify algorithm for searches and things. I don't know. I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but it seemed to me like it would be smart to start doing video of the podcast now so that we didn't one day look back and say, oh, I wish we had always done video of the podcast. The problem with that is that I got kind of distracted by figuring out the right way to do the video, the best way to do the video. What does my hair look like in the video? Do I look like an idiot in the video? What's the color? Is the color correction right? And all this stuff. This is why this show was called The Political Spectrum, because there are things that JJ Michaels, your host, me, gets hung up on that can be a little difficult. And one of them, by the way, is lighting and color. Big deal for old JJ. So here's what I decided, that I'm going to not care. And we're just going to do our best. And I also did a couple of different things. So instead of going back and doing a bunch of post editing to get the screen shares in there that I want so I can show you guys what I'm looking at, I'm going to go back. I re-upped my subscription for a live podcasting software called Ecamm, which should allow me to toggle back and forth without having to go back and edit it later. Was that interesting to you? I hope so. It's fascinating. It's the reason why things have been going slow. I did a little bit of experimenting on this just earlier on this beautiful afternoon here in the Hill Country in Central Texas. Seemed to work. We'll see. I hope it works because, each episode's like 25, 30 minutes long. If it doesn't work, I got to start all over. Don't want to have to do that. So much has happened since we last spoke. The Democratic National Convention did its whole thing over the course of the week. It, just pretty much like we expected. No real policies discussed. It's a pep rally. That's okay. That's what it was. Robert Kennedy Jr., son of Bobby Kennedy, one-time attorney general and assassinated presidential candidate from 1968. He was running as an independent, threw his hat in the ring with old Donald J. Trump. That's interesting. We might talk about that. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things we could talk about. Tulsi Gabbard. She also announced today that, or yesterday maybe, that she was endorsing Trump. People were acting like this was kind of a surprise, or at least the Trump press release was. She had already been hired to help him do debate prep for the Trump-Kamala debate, which is supposedly coming up. I say supposedly because now they're talking about not doing it. They're always talking about not doing it or doing it. The back and forth is strange. But check this out. I had heard, maybe you did too, that the reason why they were potentially scuttling this Kamala and Trump debate was because of a question over muting the speakers, muting the, whoever's talking when it's, muting the person that's not talking when it's not their turn. And I assumed, probably like many of you did, that was because Trump doesn't like to be muted. No, I assumed wrong. And if you also assumed that, you also assumed wrong. Because what it really is that they had already agreed when it was supposed to be Trump Biden, they had already agreed that the debate would include a mute button, right? That the moderators would silence the person the person who was waiting to speak, right? If it's not your turn to speak, you can't talk, right? It is Kamala's camp, interestingly, that is saying they want to do away with that and just let everybody talk over each other. And I think I know why. I think it's because the mute button benefits Trump because he can't keep his mouth shut. He can't help himself talking over people. And the worst thing he could do in a debate with Kamala is allow Kamala to get away with continuing to not espouse any policy positions by interrupting her every single time she tries to make a point. Not to mention the fact that in general, it just kind of looks bad and feels bad to have a 78-year-old, 6'2", who knows how many pounds, man interrupting this woman, right? So for whatever reason, the Kamala campaign is trying to do away with the mute button. I suspect that's why. And it's interesting because even though it was originally in the Biden camp that insisted that Trump be muted when he wasn't talking, when it wasn't his turn to talk, it is now the Trump camp insisting that rule stays in play. I think that's kind of interesting, personally. And it can't be Trump himself. It can't be Trump himself. It's got to be Trump actually listening to his advisors for once, saying like, dude, you did so much better when your mic just was off and you didn't even have the option to cut people off when they're talking. You did so much better. And he really did. I think that was a big part of the reason why the Biden-Trump debate was such a disaster for Biden, was because Trump was forced to just let this senile old man go when he was trying to make points. I don't know. That's my take. We're going to do a little bit of the TPS report, political spectrum report. I'm going to pull up some headlines and some things, and we are going to, in real time with no preparation, we're going to go through and talk about them. Why are we doing that today? I haven't done it in a while, but also because, honestly, I haven't been following the news much over the weekend and the last few days. I got a little burned out with all the conventions and whatever. And also, just like not much has really been happening in terms of the presidential stuff. The news in Israel and the war in Gaza it's been kind of the same for a while. There was some stuff about Hezbollah and Lebanon invading North Israel. There's some interesting news. Maybe I have been following it now that I think about it. I haven't been doing it on purpose. I've just been absorbing it, I guess. The Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, saying it might be time to lower interest rates. That would be good news for everybody. So we're going to do that. I'm also going to take a sip of my coffee, which I made, of course, with my Breville Barista Express, who does not sponsor the Political Spectrum program, but would be welcome to. We had a little bit of an interruption from a small Michaels person, a small member of the JJ Michaels family, came in to say hello. Point is, Breville, you could be sponsoring this show. You could have dozens or even hundreds, possibly as many as hundreds of people hearing about your wonderful espresso maker. But no, you don't. And if you're watching, then you can also see that I'm using a European style coffee mug, which is white. That's what makes it European style. It's a little bit bigger than the normal coffee mugs that I use. I really like the small ones because it makes me feel like I'm at like a cafe, a fancy place. But I've been doing Americanos so that the coffee lasts longer. So you got to use the tall one, but it's still white and China. China. There's got to be a joke there. Here it is. What kind of I don't know, what kind of plate does Trump eat his hamburgers on? China. That's terrible. I don't know though. There's something there. I'll let the real comedians figure that out. Of which, by the way, we do have some comedy fans that listen to this show on the regular. They tell me it's the funniest show they've ever heard. That's what the comedy people tell me. They tell me this is really good comedy. It's actually my brother and his wife, and they don't tell me that. But they do tell me positive things about the show. All right. Anyway, what are we doing? We're doing the TPS report. Let's get into it. Let's get into the TPS report. We're going to go to allsides.com. And we're also going to let's get in there. Okay. So boom. Hey, I think that worked. I just hit a little button and it brought in the all sides thing. That was nice and easy. So what do we have here? IDF rescues hostage held by Hamas. IDF is Israeli Defense Force in a complex operation. That's good. That's good. It's good to hear. I imagine all these operations are pretty complex. But anyway, all right. Anyway, so let's scroll through and see what is what. That's from the left. They say Israeli military says captive rescued from Gaza tunnel. From the center. Anyway, this is good. This is good news. Let's take a look at this. Texas has dropped. Can you see this? Yeah. Texas has dropped 1.1 million names from its voter rolls in the past 3 years, governor says. Okay, that is Governor Abbott, of course. All right, so I'm going to read this. So more than 1 million names have been dropped from Texas voter rolls in the past 3 years, including nearly 500,000 people who have died. Republican Governor Greg Abbott said Monday, an announcement crediting anti-fraud legislation with the purge. The dropped names also include 500,000 whose eligibility status is unclear, mainly because they didn't respond to notices about address updates or other questions from the state. Texas also purged the names of some 6,500 people who were considered potential non-citizens. Abbott's office said. What is a potential non-citizen? We'll come back to that in a second. Most of this stuff makes sense. Dead people, eligibility unclear because they didn't respond to notice for address updates, other questions from the state. I live in Texas. It's really easy to register to vote here. So these people can presumably be added back to the voter rolls just by verifying their address. But let's click read full story here and okay, stop it. Labor Day savings. Come on. All right. You know what, all sides? You got to stop with they just shouldn't have paywall stuff. We edited that out. The stories from the Dallas Morning News. Who has a paywall? People still do paywalls. You do paywall, and then I still have to watch advertising. That's no wonder they're not working. Anyway, I'm curious about what the 6,500 people who are considered potential non-citizens are, what that means. I have an idea of what this might be talking about. There was a raid. Let me see if I can search in all sides. There was a Texas raid on a voter turnout thing. And let me see if I can find this. Latinos. Yeah, here it is. Latinos accuse Paxton of using AG's office to depress voter turnout. And Can we get the full story on this one? Dallas Morning News acts again. Yeah, okay. Oh, here we go. Nope. Come on, Dallas Morning News. You know, it's been a great podcast so far, by the way. Don't you guys think? Fantastic. Well, we're trying new things here. It's working. I'm just gonna tell you the story. The story is that the Attorney General's office, led by Ken Paxton, authorized a raid on home, I believe, in the San Antonio area, owned by an 85-year-old Latina woman. And the outcry, I saw the story originally on NBCnews.com, and the outcry was that voter suppression, this is awful, and they're just trying to intimidate Latino, Hispanic voters, whatever, from voting, and this is just a get out the vote operation, whatever. Okay, so here's what they found at the raid. 65 cell phones and some large number, like 30 or 40 laptops, all registered to different people's names, in this 87-year-old woman's house. And this was following a 2-year investigation into a group that Texas suspected was a front group for setting up what they call vote harvesting. They suspected that they were making fake voters or registering dead people, things like this. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who has 65 cell phones and 45 laptops all registered in someone else's name, not to mention 87-year-old women with 65 cell phones. Seem a little bit weird to you? And yet, despite owning up to that in the article, the NBC News article still portrays this. I give them credit for even mentioning the reason for their search, but still portrays this as this awful thing. And it's just filled with quotes from the attorneys representing the people that were searched. And one of the lines was that they were rummaging through their personal things for hours and hours. That's the search. That's how searches work. They go and they look for everything because they're prosecuting the case. They're bringing charges against somebody, and they have one opportunity to search, and they need to have every piece of evidence that they might be able to have. So, look, obviously there was untoward activity going on, but what's most amazing about this is, like, why wouldn't we all be united on the idea that we only want registered voters, American citizens, let's just say, or registered voters or eligible voters voting? I don't understand why this is difficult. I've never understood why this is difficult. I'm going to tell you guys a story. This is a J.J. Michaels story, a real one that happened. There is no citation for this because I'm the citation. I was at an event in Austin, Texas, and it was a fundraising event that had some musicians at it and some barbecue and things like this, as they do, for, I don't know, some left cause. And the reason I was there was because I had friends that were playing it. And so even though I'm not a politician or an important person yet, I was invited because I had some friends playing it, and I was friends with the woman who organized it, who worked at the Capitol building here in Austin, Texas. So I'm just going around minding my own business, having some barbecue, listening to the music, having a beer or two, talking to some interesting people. And I came across I was introduced to a University of Texas professor who had a great deal of fame discussing voter suppression. And I asked this man through the course of conversation something that had always confused me. I said, "Professor, I've always been confused on how it is that voter ID laws are racist in today's society. How is it racist to require somebody to show ID in order to vote? This doesn't make any sense to me. We do this in every other area of life." At the time, by the way, I don't know, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago, maybe more. The voter ID laws were hot. They were hot, and every state was trying to enact them. And the left was saying, this is voter suppression. This is like a poll tax. We're back to Jim Crow. Jim Crow on steroids, as Joe Biden once said. about something else. Who knows what? Anyway, I asked this professor, for whom this is their area of specialty, published, I think, a book, certainly all kinds of papers and speaking tours, and this is what he does. He talks about voter suppression through the decades. So I asked him, how is this voter suppression? I don't understand how this is prejudicial against one ethnic group to require identification to vote. And you'll never guess what he said. Now, before I tell you, this is somebody who had given talks on this exact subject. Prior to the conversation, he said, yeah, I gave a speech on this, about how this is voter suppression. And I said, well, how is that? Explain it to me. And he goes just like this to me. He goes, it's not. It's like, wait, what? So what I expected you to say. He says, it's not. It's obviously not. It's like, well, then why is everybody... Do you understand what I just said? This expert on voter suppression, racial voter suppression through the decades, a UT professor who at the time was giving speeches and publishing papers on how voter ID laws were just new forms of voter suppression. I asked him off the record, just chatting over a couple beers and some barbecue, how is this voter suppression? I'm confused because I know lots of black people and Hispanic people, and they all have IDs and stuff. I don't understand. Why is it hard? And they show their IDs for everything, to get into a bar, to drive a car, to even if they don't have a car. I understand not everybody has cars. They show ID for everything, right? And it's not difficult to get. How is it voter suppression? I said to this gentleman, and he said, it's not. He just said it's not. It's like, well, I'm confused then. Why are you telling everybody that it is? You just told me that you're giving. He's like, well, it could be. It's not, or it could be. I don't understand which is which. It's not, or it could be. He's like, well, these laws aren't. They're not voter suppression. Of course. And he's like kind of laughing. He's like, obviously, it's no more difficult for a black person or a Hispanic person to get a photo ID than it is for a white person. Of course not. But that could be a slippery slope to other laws that would be voter suppression. Guys, you have to understand, this is a very common tactic. I'm calling it a tactic. Let's be nicer. Let's say it's a fallacy. It's a very common flawed way of thinking among those on the left. And you see some of it on the right as well. It's the slippery slope fallacy, which is that every policy or every thing that might happen, what that policy is saying is not important. What it could someday lead to is what's important. So don't take the policy based on its own merits. Judge the policy based on your imagination of what could be to come. Well, that's bad enough as it is, because it is a fallacy. It's a flawed way of thinking. Everything should be taken independently, discreetly. But what's worse is when you are lying is too strong of a word, when you are not being clear about your reason for opposing a policy. So let's talk about like abortion restrictions, okay? It's one thing if folks who want unrestricted abortion say, or lightly restricted abortion, whatever, say, I don't like this heartbeat law, like that if you can detect a heartbeat, then you cannot terminate the pregnancy, because that could be a stepping stone to a complete abortion ban. Okay, well, they're still suffering from slippery slope fallacy, but at least they're being honest about it. They're saying, maybe not that bad on its own, but it could lead to something else. With the voter stuff, they're not even admitting that what they're really concerned about some future policy that could be oppressive, racist, illegal. And I think the reason they're not concerned, they're not honest about that, is because they're not really concerned about it, because they know that's not true. And this gets back to what I was saying before. They know it's not true that like somebody is trying to prevent people from voting on like racial grounds. They partially know it's not true because it's illegal unconstitutional. These things get challenged anytime. Even reasonable laws get challenged. Voting laws get challenged, and some of them lose. And certainly a law that explicitly targeted a certain racial group would have no chance of surviving a court challenge. So why then are they pretending that these voter ID laws could lead to oppression or even our oppression? I don't know. That's a question that you should ask. I don't really know the answer to that myself. It is possible. One possible reason would be that they want, like the folks on the right are saying, they want illegals voting. I suspect it's a little more clever than that. I suspect it has more to do with the fact that, like this raid in Texas, that the more gray area you have around how somebody is allowed to vote, the easier it is to fudge it. I'm not saying only Democrats do this. I'm just saying that the current raid that just happened a few days ago in Texas was a Democrat-affiliated group, and it doesn't mean they're especially evil, but it does mean it's especially hilarious when the media reporting on this particular thing is so biased and just talking about oppression and suppression. And there's even a quote from the attorney who's defending these folks saying, "We don't do poll taxes in this country anymore." Well, that's true. And it's not a poll tax to say, we suspect that you are registering non-humans. Like, I'm not saying illegal immigrants aren't humans. I'm saying you're registering fake people to vote or dead people. And we've spent 2 years investigating it, and we kick your doors in and find that you have 65 cell phones not in your name and like 3 dozen laptops. That's a little weird, don't you think? Doesn't really feel like Jim Crow literacy laws. Like, you have to be able to read this in order to vote, and we give white rednecks super easy things to read, and we give like black business owners, like Greek or something, well, he can't read, he can't vote. Poll taxes where you have pay to vote, basically. This is not that. So I don't know. This is enough for today. I want to leave you with this. When you hear somebody saying voter suppression, I want you to remember what they're trying to do is keep you from voting. And this goes for the right too. When they say your vote doesn't matter, they really want is for you to lose your trust in the system and don't vote. They really want. So when they say, well, don't bother in Texas because the AG's office is suppressing the vote anyway, what they're really saying is don't bother to vote. I don't know. I just can't stand that type of thing. That's enough. That's enough. I think this is working out okay. The technology seems to be okay. The weather's okay. It's rainy this week in Texas. Everything's okay. You okay? I hope you're doing okay. If you have something you want me to talk about, send me an email. Go on to the podcast things and click 5 stars. How much you love the show. I know you love the show because you're still listening here at the end. So tell everyone how much you love it. Spread the word. Tell people. Send them the links. Apple Podcasts now, by the way, can be listened to without an Apple device on just any web browser. We're on Spotify. We're on Stitcher. We're everywhere podcasts can be found. Where can you be found? I don't know. See you soon. Bye.